Welcome to the Trusted Advisor podcast, where you get a deep dive into the world of financial planning with industry leaders who share their stories of winning and learning as they charted their path to success. This podcast is for the curious, those of you that like to dig into the detail. If that sounds like you, get ready to listen and learn.
Welcome to the first episode of the Trusted Advisor podcast. My name is Rob Pyne and I'm the founder and CEO of HPH Solutions. In this first episode, we're flipping the script and I'm in the hot seat, playing the role of guest contributor, chatting with Ben Calder and Ivana Sanzari from Calder Wealth Management, and I'm sharing with Ben and Ivana all the details of our employee share plan. At HPH, we commenced our employee share plan in July 2020, initially inviting 3 long-term team members to buy some equity in our business. That equity holder group has since grown to 16, above and beyond the 5 director shareholders in our business. In this episode, I share all the details of our plan, including the finance options our team have to fund their investment, how we approach the valuation of the business when selling equity to the team, how we encourage a long-term ownership mindset through a growth-focused vesting schedule, how our plan functions like internal private equity, and finally, the formula we use to issue equity to provide a clear path to ownership. I hope this episode is useful to anyone thinking of starting their own employee share plan or to anyone that wants to be a part of one, and that this episode sets the tone for the level of detail you can come to expect when tuning into future episodes of the Trusted Advisor podcast. With that introduction, let's get into my conversation with Ben and Ivana. So employee share plan, you're thinking of doing something similar or are you just wary up with that?
Yeah, I mean, we're looking at sort of researching succession and sort of, I guess, rewarding the team for growth going forward. So there's, as you know, there's probably a million ways you can do it. And I sort of like the idea of sort of a share plan as opposed to cash bonuses, I mean, there might be a place for both. Yeah, just really in regards to having them have skin in it, participate in the growth of the business as well. Yeah, them do well from the growth out of the business, and I guess as a way of additional retention, and why they would want to stay with us.
Yeah, for all of those reasons, we did that. A few years back now, as you know, and so yeah, it was definitely all about retaining and rewarding. We wanted to make sure we could keep our best people, but also reward them for the contribution they were making, and we didn't really want to go down the bonus path either. We just decided that it was going to be more about finding people who wanted to be a part of the business long term, and they could share in the success of the business by being an owner, as opposed to.
Yeah, I mean, we have fantastic tenure, so we have a great team, and they've been with us sort of. A lot of our senior advisors are approaching 20 years with us, so this is all new and in addition to everything that we're already doing. So what's your experience been with it? And, has it worked? Has it not worked? Where hasn't it worked, I guess?
Yeah.
What would you change?
Yeah. So overwhelmingly, it's been a positive thing for us and our team. We now have 16 share participants in our unit trust, and everyone who's been invited in has accepted the opportunity to buy into the business, which has been great, and obviously great for them too, because it's been growing and they've shared in the growth. So what we would change, and then I'll get into some of the specifics of what's working, I guess, but what we would change. We started down the path of talking to Succession Plus, and Craig West was super helpful.
Yeah.
At getting us to the point of understanding some of the dynamics you can set up inside an employee share trust. He has an off-the-shelf product which essentially deals with the issuing of equity to employees based on performance. So it's a performance-based issue of stock, and it's units in a unit trust. We didn't want to go down that path where we were issuing that, because he's gone through the process of getting a tax ruling, and there's not an immediate assessment on the issuing of those securities. Because of the tax ruling he's got, it's like a 5-year deferral of the tax treatment if you're issuing securities. But we kind of just went away from that and said, we just want to have people who want to be an owner buy in and basically take an interest in the business. We'll put a valuation on it. We'll offer them a position each year if they're invited in. And then those that wish to purchase equity can do so. And therefore there's no issuing of units based on performance. It's purely a equity transfer.
Right.
They're
And
paying.
so, which is still linked to employment and has conditions around it, good leaver, bad leaver, all that sort of stuff as well.
It does, yeah, for sure. And so that's what we learned is that the trust deed that Craig had developed, obviously with a solicitor in his camp, was specifically designed for that issuing of units, whereas we went away from that. So he amended the trust deed, but it still had some kind of hangover clauses in it that makes it look a bit hybrid. And what we learned in the process of now, as we've grown our equity base to 18% equity ownership from employees, we have obviously bank finance, and the bank won't take security over that equity. So the guarantees that sit on directors are now disproportionately higher than the equity the directors own. And so that's the learning that we've taken, 5 years in. And so talking to the bank,
you could ultimately transfer those shares that sit in the unit trust to become direct shareholders as opposed to through the unit trust, though, couldn't you? And then
we could. Yeah, we could, but we don't want to necessarily do that. And the way in which we're going to deal with it is, in fact, directly with the bank's lawyers and our own solicitor. We're going to rewrite the deed. Essentially, instead of going with an employee share plan deed, which has those sort of clauses in it that are kind of specific to employee share trusts, that's where things get snagged with the banks. And so what we're going to do is to essentially go with a standard unit trust. And instead of having a, purpose-built unit trust, it'll be a unit trust that has all the particulars of a typical unit trust, but then we'll have a unit holder agreement, much like a shareholder agreement, which will have all the terms around good leaver, bad leaver, tag along, drag along. All of that stuff can be contained in the unit holder agreement. And so we can essentially get the same outcome, and we can thankfully transfer the equity across without any stamp duty issues. So essentially, we're going to transfer the equity from the units in the current unit trust to a unit trust, and that'll essentially give us that ability, we believe, with the banks to have them take security over that interest as well, and so the guarantee will be spread across the entire equity base, as opposed to, because as it grows, the equity those employees have, then the directors who have direct shareholdings are having a higher guarantee on their holding than they actually now have proportionately in the business, and that's why we want to make that change.
Yeah, and it obviously give you a little bit more runway.
Yeah, I mean, we think that inevitably
they're going to lend you another whatever the value is on that 18% that you can't access now if the right deals presented themselves.
That's right, exactly. So that's certainly part of it, and the unit holders obviously have terms they've agreed to in the unit trust that we've structured already, and those terms will carry over. But it's definitely probably the key learning that we've encountered.
So with that, so you're not, so if you're just using it for key staff that you're making an offer to participate,
yeah,
they have to go and find all the money themselves. So if you said, "Hey Joe, we're going to allow you to buy $100,000 worth of shares," they'll need to go and have equity in their home or wherever they get it, but they'll need to source that 100,000 personally. You're not saying if you put up 50%, the firm will provide a facility, etc.
We are giving them the option to do either. They can use the business as security, or they can use their own security. And the difference for them is if they use their own security, obviously they can get better terms with their own property security, lower interest rate, and they can decide how they manage the cash flows that come in the way of dividends. Whereas if they take the business as security, because they don't have equity in their own home sufficient to fund their interest, then they don't see the dividend directly. It'll go off the loan, and the loan is higher. The interest rate is higher because obviously cash flow financed business debt. We're not charging a premium. It's simply what we are charged by the bank, and we just pass that straight through. But it is a premium to what they can get if they have property security. So in the first year, we are allowing for anyone who wants to use the business security, we're allowing them to take the full interest of that purchase against the business. But years 2 and beyond, it's a 50-50 arrangement. So they have to come up with half of the equity themselves. So let's say we've got an offer to them and we say you can buy up to $50,000 worth of equity this year. And they say, I'd like to take that, but they can't get the 25K themselves. And then we match it with 25K against the business. They might only come up with 10, in which case we'll match it with 10 against the business. In case it's 20 of their 50 they can take this year.
So it's effectively the business's vendor. I mean, you've got your debt facilities, whatever, with the bank, but they're not taking a loan directly with the bank secured by GSA over HPH.
HPH is taking that finance from the bank and on lending it, and largely because the bank wouldn't do small sums of loans for those amounts that were being purchased. So they allowed us to borrow the money directly, obviously, and we passed that through. We then have a separate loan agreement with each staff member that takes the interest, takes the loan finance. So that's we have a separate, a loan agreement. Our accountant does all the preparation of the documentation around that now, after originally getting it from, I think it was from Craig's lawyers when we first set it up. Yeah. So, but there is a private loan agreement now between us and each staff member that wants the business as security for their funding.
And you basically just got the shares as security. So
that's it. Company trustee for a share trust, and the trustee company, the directors are the directors of that company. Directors of the main business are directors of that trustee company as well. So we have a level of management control over that trustee company.
Do you have trading windows in that? If people need liquidity for a new Louis Vuitton handbag or whatever's going on in their lives?
Yeah, we don't have a trading window as such, but if anyone wants to sell out any time, we allow them to do that, and we just buy it back off them. So the business has got the means to simply buy shares back. That's happened once. One staff member had to leave. He had a family tragedy, and that changed his life immeasurably. And he has essentially gone into retirement early because he needed the time out. So we bought his shares back. And that was something that the trust deed originally we had didn't contemplate very well. So we had to navigate that in the way that the deed was written, but we managed to get that done. And there is actually now a lot more flexibility around share buybacks than there was when we first set the deed up. The rules have changed there, and our accountants have informed us that we can simply buy shares back, or essentially buy the shares back, and the units get extinguished, because there's an equivalent number of shares issued to the trustee company, holding it in trust for the unit holders who have an equal 1-for-1 unit for that share. And the unit holder agreement deals with the terms around that, which I can talk about as well.
And then it's still effectively an employee. So the shareholdings there are linked to their employment, or they can retain the those units beyond their employment.
It is linked to their employment, and it's one of the conditions of being a shareholder or a unit holder. We call it an equity holder. You can only be an equity holder if you actually are employed, and and so we have a condition that they have to be sold back to the business if they depart. And the only exception to that rule is if you were a director for 5 years preceding your exit, then you can hold the interest in the securities for up to 5 years. And that's typically around the shares. The way we're structured now is we're 5 directors that are shareholders, and then we've got the unit trust. But we think ultimately the unit trust will become an increasingly, important vehicle for the build out of the equity holders. 5 years is the term if you were a director immediately preceding for 5 years. But because we don't want passive shareholders in the business, we want to be. It's a very much an intention. Yeah, you're in because you're working in the business, you're helping it grow, you're part of the team. We don't really want private money sitting on our balance sheet that doesn't contribute significantly to the success of the business.
Yeah. So then how do you strike valuation around that? So with that team member that needed to leave, that's all set up and agreed. So like you've got a formula that gets reviewed from time to time, or to set the valuation on the shares?
Yeah, so we hold a very consistent valuation method. And so that's just the same as they pay on the way in, we pay on the way out. So obviously it's a different price because the price has obviously increased over time, but the same methodology is used on the buy-in, buy and the sell-out.
So that's just like some multiple of profit that you guys think is reasonable. And if that's discounted to market, like I know, obviously we're seeing some pretty big market multiples out there.
Oh yeah, I mean it's a good question. Is it discounted to market? Possibly. We're not seeking to extract the highest value from our staff, but we don't think we're selling it cheap either. So we've come up with what we think is a very fair value. And we know that if the market was to buy our business outright, we possibly would get higher multiples than we're selling to our staff, but not dramatically, I don't think, unless we tested that in the market and found something.
You don't want to overdo it and it doesn't work either, right? So,
you don't want your staff to pay a premium and feel like they're being, as an extortionate price to buy in. You want them to want to buy in and do the maths on it and say, if I buy in at this price, what will my dividend be and what will the likely growth be, and show me the history of that. And we do all that. So that's why we've had great take up. People are saying it's fair and reasonable. It's a good return on their investment. And it has been. So people have been buying in, have been enjoying a very successful period of growth for our business and getting a reward for that.
Yeah, so 10 times profit's a bargain.
Yeah. It's not quite that high.
Okay.
How did you announce and roll out the share plan?
Yeah, it's a good question, Ivana. I think, I'm trying to remember now, there was an employee share manual. We've actually got a manual which detailed the terms. We made that available initially to those we were inviting in. And so that was a very small group of people initially, which has obviously grown over the last few years. But we had an employee manual and we actually just got those people in a room and just shared the terms, told them how we would be proposing to run it, and asked if they were interested. And everyone who was invited in initially were interested. They took everything that we offered them in terms of equity opportunity to purchase. And that trend has continued, yeah.
I sort of have been thinking around doing it around, so I was initially thinking around sort of, I like what you're doing where they're sort of, because they are going to receive the upside, so we're obviously growing at a pretty aggressive rate, much like you guys have been. And we want that absolutely to continue, and we want staff to be on board and aligned with that, and and then benefit from that. So that's why I was sort of thinking around, okay, if we had budgets of X for the year and they're not maybe at 10% under or whatever it is, let's just say we achieve that budget and do X amount of 100,000 over that maybe we were sort of thinking we'd put 50% of that into the employee share pool that got allocated to certain individuals at different percentages, and have a rationale around that, really to incentivize for growth, but then also use the same structure for those that wanted to buy more, that we were comfortable that we were going to be leadership in the business, and if they wanted to buy more, they could. So we were looking at using it for both, but really to incentivize growth. And even if we set some big, hairy, audacious targets where we would, if we got, the business to this type of, metrics, whatever the metrics are in, 5 years' time, X amount of will drop into we will make X amount of value available in there to, which would probably be gifted. So that would be like, that would really be us sort of tripling in 3 years, which is mean everyone's run rate's going to have to increase significantly to make that happen. So that's sort of initially, that's where I was thinking about it. And then if we did want to offer X amount of shares, which so at the moment I own 100% of the shares in the firm, that we do it through that same structure that had all the, all those conditions around it, which are related to employment.
Yeah. Another key learning, I guess, that I would share at this point is that the simpler it is, the better, largely because the actual administrative effort involved as it grows, because we've got a condition around as the business makes the offer available and people acquire an interest, they let's say they put $100,000 in, and that's their investment amount. We don't allocate and essentially vest the growth on that $100,000 fully until 5 years after that tranche has been issued. So
say that again, Rob. Say that again. Explain that.
Yeah. So let's say you bought in and you put $100,000 on the line. We've actually made it such that the growth on the value of those units, because the unit trust obviously has a unit price or the share price of the company each year. We don't allow for the growth to fully vest for 5 years. So at the end of year one, 20% of the growth on that tranche is vested effectively. And if you were to leave, you would get 20% of the growth, not all of it. And so after 5 years, that tranche, you will actually have fully vested the growth in the business over that 5 year period. But every single purchase you make has a 5 year vesting period for the growth that it achieves. That's intentional because we want people to not just buy in, try and make a quick win thinking, oh, Calder Wealth is growing great. Let's just buy in for a few years and try and capitalize on the growth. And then we'll just pull out and take it off the table. We had that situation with an employee who became a director for a period of time back a few years ago and was in and out in 3 years. And we sort of thought that was hardly the intention at the time. But
everyone playing the long game, basically.
Yeah, that's right. That person may have had that intention to play the short game, and we just wanted to guard against that in future to say that if you want to play the short game, this is not going to really work very well. So the long game is what we're all about. Obviously, directors are all about that, and we want all our staff who are buying in to know that up front and go, yeah, I want to be in, and I accept that there's a 5 year vesting provision on the growth. So that doesn't mean to say life might not change. And now we've got some extenuating circumstances in the situation where the staff member had to sell out because of his family situation. We didn't apply that rule. We actually allowed him to take it in full because it was a clear good leaver situation. And that's where the good leaver, bad leaver policy kicks in. If you're a bad leaver, there's no growth vesting. So if you becomes clear to us within 12 months of your departure that you might have looked like a good leaver, but you were in fact intending to be a bad leaver, then we apply that rule. And so we don't need to pay that person out until 12 months after their exit. And by that stage, we generally know whether they're going to be a good or bad leaver.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. But they're still getting 100% of the dividends from day one. So they're not disadvantaged from a cash flow point of view.
Correct.
It's really just to say you are, aligned to the success of the business over the longer term, and on that.
And we manage the dividend flow.
Opportunity for you.
Yeah, that's right. We manage the dividend specifically with the interest repayments in mind. So our dividend rate's about 9%. So it's covering. It was obviously more than covering it for a fair while, and now it's still just covering it because obviously rates have risen. But yeah, we manage that dividend flow so people don't have to put their hand in their pocket to fund the payments. We don't actually have a principal repayment plan for the people who are purchasing, even with the business security, because we initially had it forecast. It was about a 7 year time frame for the principal repayment based on the dividend flow. It's now likely more to be a longer duration loan, but we haven't enforced at this stage a principal repayment plan. The dividends just simply go off the loan they have, and if it just meets interest only at this stage, that is what it is.
Yeah, and they can choose to reduce that with their own capital themselves if they
Correct.
want to.
And that's the most likely scenario, and that's where even people that now have the option to take the business as security, where they have the option to do it themselves, they would do it themselves because the rates are a lot better and they can manage the cash flows. They'd rather be taking the dividend and paying off their home debt and not paying it off their deductible debt associated with their investment.
Yeah, so if you're paying about 9%, that's or sort of I can guess roughly what the dividend ratio payout is, but so you're still retaining a fair bit of capital in the business as well, each over the year if it's at 9%.
Yeah, well, the dividend rate's 9%, and the business growth, has been higher than that. So the return on investment for anyone, is over 20% per annum. So it's a pretty good combination of income and growth. And that's why it's been a success for everyone who's taken it, and it's why it's attractive still for those being offered it.
what are some of any of their concerns been?
It's
Okay, if there isn't any either.
the thing, as I was mentioning a bit earlier about the administrative overhead to run it. What has happened as people have bought more shares year on year on year, they started to ask questions around, well, can I separate each tranche then, and can I be selective about which loan I'm paying off as opposed to the year 2 loan? Can I pay the year 3 loan off and leave the year 1 and 2? There might be circumstances where they prefer a certain direct, like they've got their own means to pay it down, but they might be selective which loan they want to pay off because each tranche is trying to really separately treated. And so we've had to create a fairly sophisticated sort of spreadsheet to manage not just each participant's interest, but each participant's tranches, so we can actually better give them that flexibility as to how they want to manage that repayment plan for themselves. So that's which is
painful, I imagine.
Yeah, there might be some software out there that's designed to do it, perhaps, so that we haven't found it. So our accountant is managing that as part of the accounting fees we pay each year, but they're doing a good job of it, and it's we're confident in the way it's being managed. It will continue to become it's a significant investment in admin time each year when we issue new units, because obviously there's the issuing of securities, there's the funding of the debt, there's the loan agreements in place for everyone who takes business as security. They're just recording each tranche, how much was purchased and how much of it's business borrowed versus personally borrowed. But there is still a inbuilt incentive for people to try and use their own security where they can, just because of the rate differential and the control of cash flow. And but we don't want to prohibit people from being able to buy in if they're young and really talented, and we want to retain them. We see them as a big part of our future. We want to make sure that they have an opportunity to purchase, which is why that first year we don't require them to put up any money. We can put it up for them in full in year 1.
And you're pretty comfortable that way with exactly that, where it's, well, they can have all of it in year 1, they've got a loan, and you're effectively garnishing the dividends to cover the internal, the loan, which you guys are actually paying. Did you consider doing it any other ways, or or do you're comfortable that the way you've done it probably works the best?
Yeah, we're comfortable with the way it's working. It's just being aware of the admin that goes along with it, but we're comfortable with the way it's working. It's giving flexibility to the staff members that have purchased. It's working as intended. The dividends, as I say, are funding the repayments, even if it's just interest, predominantly just interest at the moment. So we're not concerned about that, largely because what's happening is people who don't use the business as security purchase an equity interest and they buy units in the unit trust. That money that flows in, we direct that off a long-term debt that we have. So it's essentially it's not only a succession plan, but it's also a long-term funding plan for building the business balance sheet up. So people are actually paying off long-term debt. We projected our debt position and we'll be debt-free as a business in a relatively short period of time based on the purchases that are coming in from people that don't need the business as security. And even for those that do, because we're paying off other debt that isn't the ESOP debt, at some point.
Yeah.
And at some point, it's acquisition debt, at some point we'll actually have very little acquisition debt left, meaning that was capacity there for us to grow. And we bank NAB, and they've said, we are conservatively geared, so we don't, we're not always just busting to look for the next acquisition and gear ourselves up. But if we find a good purchase that we think would fit for us culturally, and we've got the means to do it, and we've got that. I mean, we all know, you'd rather pay off debt with capital than with cash flow that's going to be taxed. So, that money coming in is capital that pays off our long-term debt. So we're not having to, meet principal repayments from taxable income.
So everyone that sits in that unit trust, I would say, are employees, where all the direct holders will probably be some of the initial founders, plus some of the any mergers that you've done where those principals. So a lot of those. So only a director you can only be a director if you're a direct shareholder, effectively, and because those directors control the unit trust.
That's right. two of the directors of firms that merged in with us have become directors of HPH. So we have essentially 5 directors. 3 were originals, effectively. I obviously founded the business. My brother came in, and then another friend joined. And so there was 3 of us. Then there was the 2 that came in from 2 separate businesses, that now 5 directors. But the more recent acquisition in July of last year, that director that wanted to stay in and do an equity swap took units in the unit trust.
Right.
But yeah, for all intents and purposes, they asked the question, why would they want to be a director anyway? I mean, essentially, you take on the legal liability of running a company.
I agree. Yeah.
So as long as they get access to the return, like everyone else does.
Yeah, it's all the good and none of the bad.
That's right. So it's working very well in that sense. And yeah, the way in which we issue units is we've decided to essentially dilute the directors over time by way of issuing units in the unit trust. So essentially the 5 directors don't acquire any more shares over time, but each year we issue units in the unit trust. So that's how we're being essentially diluted over time. But we take it.
You transfer some of your personal shareholding across to the unit trust.
No, we don't. So the exact number of shares that I own now is the same number of shares I owned 5 years ago. But what happens is that as units are issued in the unit trust, because what we're saying is that we do a calculation on the organic growth that has come through for the year. So we say organic growth of X has equivalent value of Y. That Y value is the growth in the value of our business that's organically generated. And those people that are a part of the plan, we're obviously directly a part of growing that organically. And we then allow for half of that organic growth value to be acquired. So let's say we grew the business by $1 million in value, $500,000 would be available to acquire. And that is then divided up into proportionate amounts based on the salary of the staff member who's in the plan. So that's how we do it.
And where does that cash go, Rob? Onto balance sheet?
The cash that they pay for those units goes into the unit trust and then gets transferred to the company and pays off the debt. Yep. Yeah. So that's why we're building a strong balance sheet, as we're allowing our employees to take a stake in the business. And so it's working. It's quite a virtuous cycle at the moment. It's, they're helping us pay off long-term debt. They're taking a stake in the business, which is growing. Everyone's winning at the moment, the way it's working. And of course, it's no guarantee, because the business has to grow, because then you've got staff members that are not just employees that are just taking a paycheck, but actually want to know that their investment's also growing. And so if it wasn't going well, we'd have some more challenges that aren't just employee disgruntled employees, but also disgruntled investors.
They also have some control over that too, right?
So correct.
We can try and do this, and you're going to have a bit higher run rate in regards to how quickly you're getting through your work or whatever it is.
Absolutely, that's right. They're an upside investor, and just as they are if it doesn't go well. But thankfully, because they are such a talented group, that's why they're investors, because we offered it to them and they took it. That's why we're growing so well, because we've got such a good group, and they're all a part of that growth and the success, and they're sharing in it. And it's just great to see. Culturally, it's been really good for us. We have a quarterly unit holder meeting, and our Chief Operating Officer, Nick, runs that, gives everyone an update on the full strategy and the results of the quarter, and how the business is progressing and what we're planning and how we're spending our money and all the rest of it. So they're very engaged in the whole thinking and operations of the business. We have a normal weekly meeting anyway, a best practice forum where everyone's contributing to the growth of the business and sharing best practice ideas. But it goes to another level when you're an investor and you get that real buy-in. And they are really both psychologically and financially bought in. It does, if you've got the right people there, and we have, it does really change. And maybe they were always that way anyway, probably predisposed to be like that, but it really makes them feel a part of what's happening. And you get really strong engagement from the ownership group, which is a big group now. So we're really pleased with the way in which people have bought in, as I say, mentally as well as financially. And that's what's helping to drive the success of the business. And we're growing faster than we ever have at the moment, and largely because those people are doing great work.
Do you have many that aren't in the plan that think they should be in the plan, and maybe the director group thinks otherwise for whatever reason?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely something we have to be mindful of. We've been growing our team quickly, so we have got a bit of a time frame condition around people's purchase. So we don't want someone coming in 6 months and being offered equity. We had initially a 5-year time frame, but that was too long. That was a key learning for us because some really talented people joined our firm, and in fact, I can say that 3 of the 5 that joined this year have been with us just 2 years, but they've proven in very quick time not just how capable they are from a technical, standpoint in terms of their role, just their behaviour, their cultural contribution has been tremendous. So we're really looking to find, as the people come through, say we want these people to stay. These people are terrific. They are they bought in from day one, but all their behaviours were in line with what we would have hoped from a long-term employee, and they were there 2 years and proved themselves in that time frame. So we are putting a little more structure around that, so there's a bit more of a matrix around behaviour and skills, so we can actually do an assessment of behaviour and skills, because it's been a bit more at director level discretion, and we want to try and be a little more clear about what it would take to be invited in. And so people otherwise are thinking, well, I think I'm doing good work. How is it I'm not being invited in? And I think that's some of the stuff that we want to be better at, because we don't want people to be in the dark as to perhaps why they're not being asked to take a stake in the business. So it's something we're working on at the moment, but I've got a pretty good handle on how that's going to look. And that was my quarterly rock this quarter. It's 10 days from the end of quarter, and I've pretty much broken the back of that plan. So we'll incorporate that. Yeah.
I'd be a couple of hours before, I reckon.
Sorry?
I'd be a couple of hours before, not 10 days before.
Yeah, I sort of put a lot of time aside in early this month and stayed at home and worked on it, because when you're doing project level work, it needs a bit of uninterrupted time. But we've made some good progress there, and I feel like we've got a good plan as to how we'll execute on that, and just give people more clarity. It'll actually apply to salaries and remuneration modelling as well. So it's very much the same matrix of behaviour and skills. We'll have a remuneration model around that to say, well, how would I get a pay rise? What would it take, and what does it look like? What are the bands, and how? And we want a combination of both skills and behaviour to contribute to that remuneration review every year. And the remuneration review or the model will actually be, the behaviour piece will be a 360 feedback, and the skills is more of a manager level performance review. So it'll be a combination of those two things that'll contribute to people's determination as to whether they're the right fit to be invited in the plan.
So once they've, and then talking about that with performance, once they've bought in, say you had someone buy a tranche last year, they automatically get to buy new tranches in the following years, or is it still linked to, they've got to, if there was some KPI performance issues?
That is a great question, Ben, and because it actually has happened, and the answer is that they're not invited to participate in the year where they've had some performance issues. So they're still in the plan because they have a stake from maybe 2 years ago.
Yeah, they've either paid money or whatever.
Yeah, that's right. So that's still there, and that tranche stands alone, and it'll keep growing like the original purchase. That'll still be a success, hopefully for them. But we then don't allocate them an amount of that pool of capital that's able to be purchased. They don't get allocated that amount, and that's something that they're not surprised by, because everyone knows how they're performing. And if they didn't have a good year for whatever reason, and that's it could be a number of different things that could influence that. Could be family situation that's really just distracted them, and that has been the case in one instance this last round. Someone had one of our team members who we really value has had some private challenges, family related, that actually have meant that they haven't been able to be as effective as they would like to have been. And we had just a pretty open conversation about that, and they accepted that. So yeah, that's definitely how we treat it each year.
Yeah. So that tranche that gets allocated for this year, that's based on what you think the organic growth of the business has been for the year. And half of that is being made available to buy.
Correct.
So that's where each tranche comes from. So if you had a flat year for whatever reason, I don't know.
Yeah, there'd be nothing. There'd be nothing available.
So it is sort of growth. It is growth orientated because there's no more shares to buy if the thing doesn't if you don't grow.
Exactly right. There's nothing to purchase if we don't grow.
I think I missed that before, the importance of that. I think, yeah, that's really good because it's sort of, that's what we just want to align it to growth. Like, you don't just buy in and it stay the same. There's no point selling anything. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, so right. I mean, that's a great, insight you've just sort of gathered there, but it's built, designed to be a growth engine. That is, if you help it grow and the business grows, then you get your opportunity. Yeah. If you don't grow, then yeah, there's nothing to buy. Yeah, but that's exactly it.
Yeah.
Does that help?
Yeah, that's heaps. That's enough, Rob.
Yeah.
Just take it easy. Yeah, no, it's really good.
You ask good questions. You've actually uncovered a lot in a limited time, but that's because you ask good questions.
Well, I've been thinking about it for ages, and it's sort of, you just, like with lots of other things that you and I have discussed over the years, I'd like to do a lot of research before I pull the trigger on anything. Probably to my detriment, but anyway.
No, but you've got obviously key people in your business too that you want to retain and reward, and one of them sitting to your right, immediately to your right. So I know that it's been something you and I have talked about. So
which right?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely, and that's part, and sort of. I think, initially I was thinking I want it to be available for leadership. Sort of we've moved to, I think we were talking about into team structures, and sort of we've gone to diamond teams. I think we're probably about to move to house teams, but
yep.
Those heads of house, they're going to run those teams day to day so that I don't have to, or Ivana doesn't have to, etc. So they, there needs to be some good incentive for them to do that really well.
Yeah, for sure. Yep. So I know you've been thinking about it for a while because I remember talking about it with you some months back. So yeah, it's might have even been.
I've been thinking about this for like 3 years. So, yeah. But yeah, I did a session with Succession. I think I was telling you we went to a thing last week, and just a few light bulbs went off for me on that employee unit trust structure, and sort of just see, however it is, whether it's your unit trust or it's just a neat way of having rules around everything. And because I don't know, I would still, being, a second generation Calder, I would like to hold, a good percentage of the company for a long time to come yet. So
yeah. Yep, for sure. No, that's right. I mean, hold for the growth that you're helping to contribute to, but also have others who are being a part of it get a share of it.
Yeah, you want to see them all do awesome out of it as well. Yeah.
And that's the thing. I mean, you get to a stage in your career where the greatest satisfaction is not just what you personally make from the business that you've helped create and grow, but actually seeing other people just have the faith in you and what you do to help them get their own personal objectives met too. So
yep.
It's
that's the best thing, I reckon. My last 5 years, that's the thing I've enjoyed probably the most, is seeing that happen. And that's without employee share scheme, but that's just seeing staff who've been with you a long time really kicking big goals now and really standing up and leading and, doing well financially and all that sort of stuff as well. So.
Yep. It is definitely the most enjoyable part, seeing people succeed from something you have helped them to get access to and that they've helped grow. So I'm super pleased with our employee share plan. It's something that has worked tremendously well for us, and we see it being a massive part of our future and continuing to grow the business. So yeah, it's a good plan.
And it's really like, I think we've had discussions as well, and everyone's, it's probably something, if you didn't want a capital partner in your business for reasons you sort of mentioned before, it's a good way of, extinguishing that long-term debt so you can, increase your runway to do more of the right deals when they present themselves too, right?
Exactly right. Yeah, it's a good formula that people are buying in, are taking a stake in something that's growing. They're paying off debt, allows you to buy more, which they can also benefit in because they've taken a stake in it. So it's working tremendously well, and I can't foresee at this stage, at least, and I can't predict the future, but I don't see it how it's going to sort of become a problem structure for us either. I think it's got, it just seems like it's got legs, like long term, to be a
yeah. Look, it's just really if everyone said they want it out the same day, or whatever. But it's
yeah. But if they did that, then of course you'd sell out to a
you would just take a bigger institutional shareholder or something, or
That's right, and that's where you get the tag along, drag along stuff happening. Obviously, inside your unit trust shareholder, the unit trust unit holder agreement, because we also want to be mindful that if the first generation directors all sell out within 2 years, the second generation guys sell out to a big insto and get paid a significant multiple north of what we sold it to them for. It might be something that's the first generation guys go, that wasn't the plan, guys. So,
right.
But that's something where, we haven't really thought about how to solve for that, but we are thinking about that one because we want it to be in the hands of a number of our staff so much that, we've seen examples that happen in engineering firm that I know in Perth here that sold out. I won't name names, but that did that. First generation guys sold internally, second or third generation sold out externally, and might have been a bit of a first generation guys might have felt like, had I known you were going to do that, I might have been a part of that and got the higher multiple. So yeah. All right.
That's really good. Thanks for that. Thanks for sharing all of that.
Thanks for your time.
All right. Good luck with it, guys.
Ciao.
See ya. Bye.
Thanks for listening and learning with us. For a complete list of episodes, show notes, transcripts, and more, go to thetrustedadvisor.com.au.